In the glittering ballrooms of Gilded Age America, one name stood above all others, synonymous with wealth, power, and unimaginable luxury: the Vanderbilts. But beneath the marble facades of their palatial estates, behind the champagne fountains and diamond tiaras, lay a darker truth. This is the story of a dynasty built on ruthlessness, torn apart by scandal, and ultimately destroyed by the very excess that defined it. The story begins not in a mansion, but on the docks of Staten Island in 1794, where Cornelius Vanderbilt was born into poverty. His father was an illiterate boatman, and young Cornelius grew up watching other men profit from the waterways that surrounded his home. At 16, he borrowed money to buy his first ferry boat, earning the nickname that would follow him to his grave: the Commodore. But Cornelius Vanderbilt was no ordinary ferryman. He possessed a ruthless ambition that terrified his competitors, and a complete disregard for the rules that governed civilized society. His character was described by contemporaries as despicable. He would spit tobacco juice across boardrooms and allegedly fondle the maids in his household. When he was just 19 years old, his philandering infected both himself and his wife, his first cousin Sophia Johnson, with syphilis. Yet this moral bankruptcy would prove to be just the beginning. Vanderbilt's business tactics were legendary for their cruelty. He would deliberately undercut competitors until they faced bankruptcy, then swoop in to buy their ruined companies for pennies on the dollar. He bribed judges, paid off politicians, and maintained close ties with New York's notorious Tammany Hall political machine. His motto was simple and chilling. He once declared, "I have been insane on the subject of money-making all my life." The Erie Railroad War exposed the darkest corners of his business dealings. When Daniel Drew, Jay Gould, and James Fisk attempted to prevent Vanderbilt from taking over the Erie Railroad, they engaged in stock manipulation and bribery on a scale that shocked even that corrupt era. But Vanderbilt was no innocent victim. When two executives he had trusted, Charles Morgan and Cornelius Garrison, betrayed him through stock manipulation in his Panama operation, Vanderbilt's response was telling. Rather than pursue legal action, he vowed to destroy them completely. Within 2 years, he had driven their company out of business entirely. His treatment of workers was equally savage. Vanderbilt was vehemently anti-union and known for harsh conditions that made him enormous profits, while his employees struggled to survive. When he wanted to acquire the New York Central Railroad Company, he simply refused to allow their passengers or freight onto his own lines, strangling their business until they had no choice but to sell to him. By the time Cornelius Vanderbilt died in 1877, he had amassed a fortune of over $70 million, equivalent to billions in today's money. He was the richest man in America, and he had built his empire on the backs of broken competitors, exploited workers, and corrupted officials. But the true curse of the Vanderbilt fortune was only beginning to reveal itself. Cornelius left the bulk of his wealth to his eldest son, William Henry Vanderbilt, who doubled the family fortune within 8 years. William Henry was known for a quote that would define the family's attitude toward the public. "The public be damned," he famously said, when questioned about running special trains for passengers. "I am working for my stockholders." But William Henry's reign was brief. When he died in 1885, the great unraveling of the Vanderbilt Dynasty truly began. The next generation of Vanderbilts transformed American excess into an art form. They built palaces that would make European royalty jealous. Cornelius Vanderbilt, the second, constructed a mansion on Fifth Avenue that became the symbol of Gilded Age ostentation. His brother, William Kissam Vanderbilt, and his wife Alva built an even more spectacular French chateau on Fifth Avenue, spending what would be millions today just on the painted ceilings and imported marble. To celebrate their mansion's completion in 1883, Alva organized a costume ball so extravagant it spent the equivalent of $6 million in today's money, with over $1.5 million spent on champagne alone. The guest list was a weapon. Alva deliberately excluded Caroline Astor, the Queen of New York society, forcing her to virtually beg for an invitation. It worked. The Vanderbilts had finally arrived, though critics like author Edith Wharton slammed them for being entrenched in bad taste, and established dynasties like the Astors still considered them vulgar nouveau riche social climbers. But the real scandals were happening behind closed doors. The family was devouring itself from within, poisoned by jealousy, infidelity, and bitter feuds that would span generations. The first great scandal erupted in 1895 and sent shockwaves through American high society. Alva Vanderbilt filed for divorce from William Kissam Vanderbilt. Divorce among the ultra-wealthy was almost unheard of in that era, seen as both a moral failure and a threat to the family fortune. The official reason was William's longtime mistress, Nellie Nistretta, but whispers in fashionable drawing rooms suggested something far more scandalous. Alva herself had allegedly been having an affair with her husband's best friend, Oliver Belmont, and was now openly courting him while still married. The divorce became front-page news across America. As one newspaper noted, it interested the rich as well as the poor who wanted to be rich, those at the top and those at the bottom of society. William Kissam Vanderbilt, whose affairs had been the talk of New York for years, suddenly found his private indiscretions exposed to public scrutiny. But the scandal that truly rocked the family involved Alva and William's daughter Consuelo. In a move that would define the callousness of Gilded Age parents, Alva essentially forced her 18-year-old daughter into marriage with the Duke of Marlborough. Consuelo was in love with someone else, but Alva was determined to secure a British title for the family. The young woman had no choice. On her wedding day, witnesses reported seeing tears streaming down Consuelo's face as she walked down the aisle. The marriage was a disaster from the start. Consuelo later wrote about the misery of those years trapped in a loveless union. In 1906, she and the Duke publicly separated, causing an even greater scandal than her mother's American divorce. It simply was not the done thing in British aristocracy. But for Consuelo, the separation was freedom after a decade of utter misery. The next generation of Vanderbilts proved even more prone to scandal and tragedy. Consider the story of Cornelius Vanderbilt III, known as Niley. When he fell in love with Grace Graham Wilson in 1896, his parents were furiously opposed. The reasons remain mysterious, but their anger was so intense that when Niley eloped with Grace, his parents threatened to disinherit him completely. When Niley's father Cornelius II died, the will revealed the depth of the family's cruelty. Niley received only $500,000 while his brother Alfred inherited almost $70 million. The family fortune had been weaponized, used to punish the son who had dared to marry for love. Niley would later brag that he was the first Vanderbilt heir to actually decrease the family fortune, spending money with abandon as if to spite the father who had rejected him. Alfred Gwynne Vanderbilt, the golden son who had received the lion's share of the inheritance, seemed to have a better head on his shoulders at first. He worked as a clerk at the New York Central to learn the business from the ground up. But his personal life was equally scandalous. 7 years into his marriage to Ellen Tuck French, she abruptly moved out. The reason she gave shocked society. Alfred had been having affairs. If you're finding this story fascinating, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the hidden histories of America's most powerful families. Alfred remarried, this time to Margaret Emerson, and seemed to be settling down. He developed a passion for horse breeding and coaching, becoming well known in both American and British sporting circles. In the spring of 1915, he decided to travel to England for a meeting of the International Horse Breeders Association. He also wanted to offer a fleet of wagons to the British Red Cross as the First World War raged across Europe. Alfred booked passage on the RMS Lusitania, one of the fastest and most luxurious ocean liners in the world. Germany had warned that British ships in the Atlantic were now targets for submarine warfare, but Alfred dismissed an anonymous warning not to travel as a prank. On May 1st, 1915, he kissed his wife Margaret goodbye and boarded the ship with only his valet, Ronald Denier. 6 days later, off the coast of Ireland, a German U-boat fired a torpedo into the side of the Lusitania. The explosion triggered a secondary blast that doomed the massive ship. It would sink in just 18 minutes. Chaos erupted on deck as passengers scrambled for lifeboats. But Alfred Vanderbilt did not panic. He did not fight for a lifeboat. Instead, witnesses watched as he calmly helped women and children into the few boats available. When a young mother holding her baby approached him desperately, Alfred promised to find her a life jacket. When he couldn't locate one, he removed his own and tied it onto her himself, even though she was holding her infant and couldn't do it alone. Multiple survivors later testified to his calm bravery in those final moments. Many considered his actions especially noble because Alfred Vanderbilt could not swim. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was choosing to die. When the Lusitania made her final plunge beneath the waves, Alfred Vanderbilt went with her. His body was never recovered. He was 37 years old, leaving behind a wife and 2 young sons. A memorial was erected on his favorite coaching road in England with a simple inscription. In memory of Alfred Vanderbilt, a gallant gentleman and a fine sportsman who perished in the Lusitania, the irony was not lost on the family. 3 years earlier, in 1912, Alfred had allegedly been booked to sail on the Titanic, but cancelled at the last minute. Some said his mother had a premonition. Whether true or not, he had escaped one doomed ship only to perish on another. His estate was valued at over $26 million, a fortune that would now pass to brothers who would prove far less responsible with the family wealth. But Alfred's tragic death was just one of many that would haunt the Vanderbilt dynasty. Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt, another heir to the fortune, became notorious for his extravagant lifestyle and gambling habits. His spending was so excessive that it nearly bankrupted his branch of the family. He married multiple times, and his daughter Gloria would become the center of one of the most sensational custody battles in American history. Little Gloria Vanderbilt became a pawn in a vicious court fight between her mother and her aunt in the 1930s. The custody battle exposed the dysfunction and neglect that plagued the family. Gloria's mother was portrayed as an alcoholic who would leave her daughter for a year at a time without even a goodbye kiss. The trial captivated America, revealing that even among the wealthiest families, children could be abandoned and forgotten. Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, a granddaughter of the Commodore, defied convention by pursuing a career as an artist. She eventually founded the Whitney Museum of American Art, but her personal life was marked by turmoil. A tumultuous marriage and a paternity suit threatened to tarnish the family's reputation even further. The once mighty fortune was evaporating. The Vanderbilts had never developed the business acumen to maintain their wealth across generations. Instead, they spent with reckless abandon on mansions they could not afford to maintain, yachts that sat unused in harbors, and parties that grew more desperate as the money dwindled. William Kissam Vanderbilt II, known as Willie K, created the first major road racing competition, the Vanderbilt Cup, in 1904. But he lost a fortune in the stock market crash of 1907 and was reduced to trying to sell vacuum cleaners and jewelry. After his divorce in 1909, unable to acquire the land he wanted, he abandoned his Georgian colonial home and started building a more modest bachelor getaway in Centerport. Even this modest home eventually grew to 43 acres with 11 buildings, a 24-room mansion, museums, a golf course, boathouse, and seaplane hangar. He reportedly played $50,000 per hole golf with the Rockefellers, burning through what remained of his inheritance. One mansion after another passed out of Vanderbilt hands. The family simply could not afford the upkeep on these palaces. Some were demolished, others were sold, A few became museums or were preserved for the nation. The Vanderbilt mansion on Fifth Avenue that had once symbolized their arrival in high society was eventually torn down. The French chateau where Alva had hosted her legendary ball was put on the market and sold after William Kay's death. The decline was shockingly swift. Within 50 years of the Commodore's death, the Vanderbilt fortune had been almost entirely squandered. The family that had once controlled a significant portion of America's wealth was broke. Lavish spending, poor investments, bitter family feuds, and a complete lack of financial discipline had destroyed one of history's greatest fortunes. But perhaps the most damning evidence of the family's dysfunction was how they treated each other. Fathers disinherited sons over disapproved marriages. Brothers were left with vastly unequal inheritances, based on nothing more than parental favoritism. Mothers forced daughters into loveless marriages to secure titles. Children were abandoned by alcoholic parents more interested in their next drink than their offspring. The Vanderbilts had conquered American industry and society, but they could not conquer their own demons. The same ruthlessness that had built the fortune destroyed it. The same disregard for human decency that had allowed the Commodore to crush his competitors had filtered down through generations, turning inward and poisoning the family itself. By the time the Great Depression struck in 1929, the Vanderbilts were already shadows of their former glory. The crash merely hastened the inevitable. Massive estate taxes and continued excessive spending finished what 3 generations of dysfunction had started. The dynasty crumbled. Today, only one of the great Vanderbilt estates remains in family hands. The Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina, built by George Washington Vanderbilt II, is the largest private home in America, with 250 rooms and over 170,000 square feet of floor space. It survives as a museum and tourist attraction, a monument to an era of excess that can never return. The rest of the Vanderbilt properties have vanished or been converted to other uses. The Oakdale mansion burned down repeatedly and served as part of a college before being auctioned after the college declared bankruptcy. Willie Kay's estate became a county museum. The grand Fifth Avenue mansions were demolished or sold long ago. The summer cottages in Newport became tourist attractions. The family legacy lives on in other ways. Vanderbilt University, founded with the Commodore's donation of $1 million, remains one of America's premier institutions. The Whitney Museum of American Art continues to showcase American artists. Anderson Cooper, Gloria Vanderbilt's son and a descendant of the dynasty, has become one of America's most respected journalists. But he has spoken openly about his family's history and the fact that by the time his mother passed away in 2019, there was little left of the fortune that had once been unimaginable. The Vanderbilt story serves as a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of wealth and the importance of character over cash. Cornelius Vanderbilt built his empire through ruthless tactics that would be criminal today. He bribed officials, manipulated stock prices, exploited workers, and destroyed competitors without mercy. He infected his own wife with disease through his affairs and treated his children poorly. His descendants inherited his money, but also his moral bankruptcy. They competed to build the biggest mansions and throw the most extravagant parties, but they failed to build strong families or develop the skills needed to preserve their wealth. They married for status rather than love, abandoned their children in pursuit of pleasure, and feuded bitterly over inheritances. The scandals came one after another. Divorce in an era when it was almost unheard of among the wealthy. Forced marriages that destroyed young women's lives. Custody battles that exposed neglect and alcoholism. Affairs that humiliated spouses publicly. Deaths on doomed ocean liners that might have been avoided. And through it all, the money kept flowing out faster than it could be replaced. No amount of wealth could fill the void at the heart of the dynasty. No mansion could provide the love and stability the family lacked. No title could give them the respect they craved, but never earned through character. The Vanderbilts believed their money made them superior to ordinary Americans. The Commodore's grandson, William Henry, famously said, "The public be damned," when questioned about serving passengers. That attitude infected every generation that followed. They looked down on those who had to work for a living, even as their own fortune was built on the suffering of workers who died in industrial accidents and railroad disasters by the thousands. 35,000 workers died each year in industrial accidents during the Gilded Age. In 1910, 1/4 of all workers in the iron and steel industries were injured annually, partly because management refused to install safety devices or shorten work hours. Between 1890 and 1917, over 150,000 mechanics and laborers were killed in railroad repair shops, the very businesses that had made the Vanderbilts rich. The Commodore never cared about those deaths. Neither did his children or grandchildren. They were too busy competing to see who could build the largest yacht or host the most expensive party. They lived in a bubble of luxury, while the workers who actually produced their wealth suffered and died. Perhaps that is the real dark secret of the Vanderbilt Dynasty. Not the scandals and affairs, not the divorces and custody battles, not even the spectacular loss of wealth. The real darkness was their complete lack of empathy for anyone outside their privileged circle. They built monuments to excess while people starved. They spent millions on parties while workers' children went hungry. They decorated their homes with priceless art while refusing to provide basic safety equipment that could have saved thousands of lives. George Washington Vanderbilt's wife, Edith, allegedly spent hours in the library at Biltmore speaking to her dead husband's ghost after he passed away in 1914. Some say the mansion is haunted to this day by George, Edith, and even a phantom orange cat. Whether those ghost stories are true or not, the real ghosts that haunt the Vanderbilt legacy are the countless unnamed workers who died building their railroads, the competitors they destroyed, and the family members whose lives they ruined through neglect and cruelty. The Vanderbilts wanted to be remembered as American royalty, as titans of industry who built the modern world, and in some ways they did build modern America. The Commodore's railroad empire connected the country and helped fuel westward expansion and economic growth. His descendants founded museums and universities that continue to enrich society today, but they will also always be remembered as robber barons who exploited everyone they could, as a family so poisoned by wealth that they turned on each other, and as a dynasty that rose higher than almost any in history, only to fall harder and faster than seemed possible. In the end, all the marble and gold, all the paintings and jewels, all the mansions and yachts could not save them. The Vanderbilts discovered what so many wealthy families have learned throughout history. Money cannot buy happiness, cannot guarantee love, and certainly cannot protect you from your own worst instincts. From the docks of Staten Island to the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, from Fifth Avenue palaces to broken families scattered across the country, the Vanderbilt story is ultimately one of hubris and tragedy. They had everything, and they lost it all. Not to economic forces beyond their control, but to their own greed, their own cruelty, and their own inability to understand that true wealth lies not in what you own, but in how you treat the people around you. The dark secrets of the Vanderbilt dynasty are not hidden in dusty archives or forgotten letters. They are written across the face of American history in the lives destroyed, the fortunes squandered, and the empty mansions that stand as monuments to a family that had everything except what mattered most. If you enjoyed this journey through one of America's most fascinating and troubled dynasties, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more historical deep dives into the hidden stories behind America's most powerful families.